welcome to a Never Mind the Ballots post-match special. The ITV debate saw Sunak and Starmer go head-to-head for the first time, and it was a fairly tetchy run-in. Sunak turned up ready to clobber Starmer on taxes, on immigration, and he even won an unexpected clap on his tough stance against striking junior doctors. Sunak needed a knockout blow, but did he do enough? One Snap poll said Sunak edged it, but today we'll drill into the numbers and use the finest in cutting-edge technology to bring the Never Mind the Ballots worm. There's 29 days to go till polls open. Can Sunak turn it around? Joining us today are our friends from JR Partners, some of the finest minds in polling. James Johnson's its founder, Scarlett Maguire its director, and the Sun on Sunday's very own Kate Ferguson. Hi guys, late night.
Indeed.
Yeah. Kate, what did you make it? Downing Street chipper this morning?
Yeah, I mean, they are chipper. And Rishi needed to go there and try and claw back some of this hefty poll lead that Keir's had. And he wanted to land some big lines. He wanted to say Labour's going to whack up your taxes and that you can't trust them on borders. He landed that again and again. And I think they'll be very pleased that Keir Starmer, in his own mouth, admitted he will put up taxes.
I know, I thought it was quite an astonishing moment, which we'll drill down into in a minute. But, I mean, if I was doing debate prep for an aspiring Prime Minister who has sort of trust issues about what they're going to do, standing in front of a podium and saying, I will put up some taxes, surely that's going to be printed on every single Tory leaflet, bus, poster,
it was being
TV broadcast.
Exactly. They were rolling it out within minutes of him saying it. It's on video, it's on the posters, on Twitter already. That's going to haunt him for this campaign.
Scarlett, how much does the difference do these things really make? We love them. You know, presumably a fair whack of the public tuned in. But is it enough to move the dial?
Yeah, I mean, we do love them. Rishi Sunak has not had the campaign he needed to so far. He called this election when he was 20 points behind. I don't think last night's going to change very much at all. We'll hear about some more of that with the numbers in a bit.
Does it change the mood, though? I mean, if he walks away from that thinking, you know, everyone sort of thought he was going to get duffed up. Starmer's, you know, carrying his Ming vase, a phrase we've banned on the show already. But, you know, he's there. All he has to do is turn up and look Prime Minister, and he would have done enough. Has he changed the narrative in any way?
I don't think he has changed the narrative. So, yes, it wasn't a disaster. And potentially after the first 2 weeks we've had the campaign, in fact, the way he announced it, potentially people might have been expecting a disaster. It wasn't that, but I don't think it was enough. Potentially he'll be happy if he's not got Tory MPs that are sort of instantly saying they're going to defect to reform or whatever off the back.
Yeah.
But I still don't think it's enough of a knockout blow, which he desperately needed.
Well, let's have a look at the data. Joining us, James Johnson, founder of JL Partners. James, what do your numbers say?
So JL Partners and The Sun ran a snap poll last night of debate viewers, 1,000 sample, getting their instant reaction to the debate through the night. And we found that Keir Starmer won the debate. He led, as you can see on the screen here, by 53% to 33% to Rishi Sunak. Around 1 in 10 don't know. So Keir Starmer will certainly be happy with that. If you drill into, though, those winnable voters for the Conservatives, those Conservative 2019 voters, you actually see a slightly different picture. There, Rishi Sunak won by a margin of more than 2 to 1. We know the population as a whole is quite hostile to the Conservatives, but when you drill into those 2019 Conservative voters, Rishi Sunak had a better night.
James, the YouGov had a poll last night which showed it, you know, it was pretty tight, but it showed Sunak edging it. I think it was 51-49. Not quite 52-48, the numbers that send chills down any pollsters. But what's the difference here? How come the difference in numbers? Yours, bigger poll, different poll? How did it work?
Yeah, so YouGov asked a question which was, putting aside your political preferences, who do you think performed best?
So park who you're going to vote for.
Park your preferences, look at the debate just on its own merits.
Is that how politics works?
We don't think it is. We asked people just straight, who do you think performed best? Now, we think that gets closer to the truth, which is people bring their political preferences alongside them. We think our question gets at how much those previous underlying attitudes towards the two leaders have changed because of this debate. And we're showing 20-point lead for Keir Starmer. That's in line with the 20-point lead we see in the polls for Labour. We're saying this didn't really shift the dial in either direction.
Fine. Kate, you know, the 2019 hallowed coalition of voters, the North, the South, the anti-Corbynistas, the Brexiteers, that is what Rishi Sunak really needs to, you know, keep binding together. Some say only Boris Johnson could do it, but do you think he can do enough to hold that coalition together to try and stem some of the losses?
Yeah, I mean, this is entirely Rishi's task, right? You're trying to hold bits of the blue wall, bits of this newly won red wall, and stop it bleeding out on the left to Labour and on the right to Reform. And obviously Nigel Farage back now.
That's much trickier now.
Much trickier. I mean, you can see that it's kind of it's crumbling all around him. And he's being quite transactional. He's saying, pensioners, I'll do this for you. Red Wall, I'll do this for you on immigration or whatever. And really the question for Rishi is can he hold enough of it? At the moment, it doesn't feel like he can.
Scarlett, 60% of 2019 voters there saying he won. Is 60% of the 2019 coalition enough to avoid a sort of 97-style wipeout and actually make this thing a little bit closer?
It's not a great place to be, I would say. In the polls, he's holding on to less than that currently, so that is an improvement. That might help things narrow.
Yeah.
But it's nowhere near enough. And I think the problem is that Rishi Sunak has, and actually, you know what? There's not that much love for Keir Starmer either. But it's people who just stop listening. And this campaign was meant to be an opportunity for him to get the public to start paying attention to him again. But at the moment, I think it's a little bit like, it's like getting a call from your ex-boyfriend. You've had enough of them. You don't want to hear their brilliant plan and why it's all actually a really great idea for you to get back together.
Most people are going to be watching the football
Exactly.
anyway.
I just think people aren't caring. People aren't listening.
James, you haven't just come armed with numbers. You have a new toy. You've been playing with it all night, I hear.
We do indeed.
Tell us about your worm.
This is the Jail Partners Never Mind the Ballots worm test. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, we got 1,000 voters, representative of the country as a whole last night. They were sitting at home, we were showing them clips, and they were saying, as they watched those clips, whether they felt more positive about the person speaking or whether they felt more negative. And that allows us, as you'll see on the screen shortly, to see how voters responded to the debate, informing some of those numbers we've just seen.
So let's have a look at that worm on the big test of immigration.
Immigration is too high, and we will need to take bold action to bring it down, whether that's legal migration, where we're going to introduce a new legal cap to guarantee that it will come down every year, or the boats, which you mentioned, where we got the numbers down last year by a third, and now we have a deterrent ready to go. Migrants have been detained, the flights will go in July, but only if I'm your Prime Minister. If Keir Starmer's elected, all those people will be released, the flights will be cancelled, and we will have no deterrent to stop the unfairness of people crossing in boats. So that's the choice for you at this election. Stick to our plan, and illegal migrants will be on those planes. With Labour, they will be out on our streets.
So, James, I thought that was actually one of the Prime Minister's better moments of the evening. A very simple soundbite, migrants on the streets or migrants on the planes, you choose. So talk us what you're seeing there, because what I can see is Tory voters really liking that. The people Sunak needs to win back liking it. Labour not liking it, but those Labour voters of 2019, Labour voters, these are the people who voted Jeremy Corbyn, right?
Yeah, so the blue line here is Conservative 2019 voters, the red line, Labour 2019 voters. And exactly right, you can see that Labour have a real sort of hostility to those Rwanda plans. You can see as Rishi Sunak here starts to talk about the number of flights, he dips down a bit, perhaps some concerns about the operationality of or the feasibility of getting those flights off. But broadly speaking, this is an issue that gets Conservative 2019 voters on board, puts off Labour voters. It's what we might call in politics a wedge issue.
And Kate, presumably that is why we're going to hear hearing a lot about immigration. Look at that worm in pure positivity. In terms of the 2019 Tory voters, he needs to hold on to.
I think we're going to be hearing two messages this campaign: tax and immigration from the Tories. This is their big domestic policy. They're promising a cap on immigrant numbers. That's legal migration. They're promising the Rwanda flights up, clear blue water. They will hammer it again, especially now reform it in the race in a big way.
James, let's more from the worm in a second. Let's have a look at just a few of the numbers we've had, and again, that difference between the 2019 voters and the public. So we've got most persuasive, most competent, most aggressive, and most boring. Talk us through those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we asked people to say which of the following attributes applies most to each politician, and you can see that what we have on the screen is most persuasive, Starmer, by about 15 points. Most competent, Starmer by 17 points. Most aggressive, more people thought Rishi Sunak was more aggressive than Keir Starmer. That could be a positive, could be a negative. And boring, Rishi Sunak also takes the prize. But again, let's drill down into 2019 Conservative voters, those key voters Rishi Sunak needs to shore up, and he does a lot better. He was seen as more persuasive by a majority, more competent by a majority. They actually pretty even draw. They actually slightly thought Starmer was the more aggressive, and by quite some margin, they thought Starmer was more boring. So not great on the overall voters for Rishi Sunak, but he can take some heart from his 2019 base.
Thanks, James. Scarlett, we know that, we don't have to look at the headline numbers of the public to know that people, Rishi Sunak is not a particularly popular guy right now, but nor is Keir Starmer. Things like aggression, how do they play with voters? Because I thought actually last night watching it, I was quite surprised by, actually, I don't think it was aggressive of Starmer. I think he kind of came looking for a scrap, right? And fair play, if you're 20 points behind, what else have you got to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's why James said it. Aggression can cut both ways. People like the idea that a politician will fight on their behalf, that they'll be able to cut through noise and get things done. That's actually something that Rishi Sunak has suffered on the last year. So when we've seen his ratings generally deteriorate since he became Prime Minister, a lot of that is because when he first came in, people thought he was able to be strong, to be able to be decisive and to take these sorts of, take this sort of action. And that's actually what's really eroded. So if he can actually potentially, come across as someone who can be aggressive in that they can put a sort of good plan in action and deliver on that no matter what other people are sort of saying or the obstacles that he might encounter, then he might be onto something. It is a tall order, though.
Kate, what did you reckon? Because I think there was a grimace at one point from Starmer, and by the end there was definitely a gawp, definitely in my copy anyway, but I saw the gawp, and by the end of it, he looked a little flustered, actually. I think that aggression might have paid off for Sunak.
Yeah, I agree. Keir got frustrated and kind of a bit ratty last night. You saw his kind of like semi-eye rolling, he's muttering to himself, that's not right, that's despicable. This sense that Keir has a lot with, you're not being fair to me, Rishi. Well, guess what, Keir? Politics ain't always fair.
He was a sort of bar and ball rather than the bar and barrister, but like it's like he turned up to a regional court hearing expecting to be able to have his allotted time, not realising he was going to get duffed up by the little fella.
100%. Sometimes Keir is too much of a lawyer, too forensic, too fixed on certain minutiae points. We saw that a bit last night. If I had a tip for him, I'd say step back, roll your sleeves up, and just be cleaner with what you're landing, and feel free to be aggressive yourself.
All right, let's look a little bit more at the worm. Now, there's some interesting bits here. We hear both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak often talk about two very distinctive messages. First of all, let's watch Rishi Sunak's message on furlough.
How do you actually connect with Paula, Rishi Sunak?
Well, I'd ask everyone to judge me by my actions. You saw what I did during the pandemic. When disaster struck our country, I implemented the furlough scheme because I knew the devastating impact it would have on people. And you know what? Every week when I'm out and about, someone comes up to me and tells me how furlough saved their family, saved their home, because that's who I am. And I don't want to put that progress at risk.
So on that, we can see that's all voters there, not a Tory Labour split, that's all of the public. And Rishi Sunak's numbers going up when he talked about that furlough scheme, the thing that he was most famous for. And let's hear what Keir Starmer, basically, his most famous soundbite.
My dad worked in a factory. He was a toolmaker. My mum was a nurse. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, and we were in a position on occasion where we couldn't pay our bills. So I know how that feels. In our particular case, we had our phone cut off because we didn't have the money. So I do know the anguish of worrying when the postman comes with a bill. What is that bill going to be? Can I pay for it?
Are you saying
I don't think the Prime Minister quite understands the position that you...
James, remarkable. So that's all of the public, not just Tories and Labour split. Toolmaker. Look at that line. We've heard it so many times. Every speech that Keir Starmer does is, my dad's a toolmaker, dad's a toolmaker. He's doing it for a reason. The public like it, right?
The worm is on the move, Harry. It's going into positive...
The worm is turning.
Well, the worm is turning. This is the toolmaker surge. We've heard it, like you say, hundreds of times. But voters, they actually say, look, there's a relatability factor here. You can see him there, tipping over that positive line. It's something that voters like. We've heard it many times. Voters haven't. They like it.
And exactly the same on furlough with Rishi Sunak. He will say it till the cows come home, but it does have a direct move. And it's not just Tory voters, that's the wider general public liking that. Right, let's keep going. Let's look at, the other big issue of the day, taxes.
We will raise specific taxes, and we've been really clear what they are. We've already dealt with the tax break on private schools. We want to end the non-dom status completely. I think that the super rich should be paying their tax. I want to get rid of the equity loopholes that are there, again, for the super rich. And I think the oil and gas companies should be paying their fair share towards our energy. So we will raise those, but we won't raise the others.
Okay, fascinating there. Obviously, bit of class war. The red line, Labour voters loving that. Red meat for Labour voters, taxing private schools, non-doms, energy companies. But actually, look at that blue line as well. It does seem to me that, you know, good old-fashioned bit of populism seems to work for Keir.
Exactly. There's two taxes which basically are popular, right? Non-doms and the oil and gas giants.
Yeah.
Note that phrase he repeats, super rich, super rich.
Yeah.
This is about fairness. We all feel like we've been clobbered loads, but if you're pitching your tax rises at this special elite super rich, you'll find popular support
But he is
for
still
it.
standing in front of a crowd saying, I'm going to put up taxes.
The non-dom bit isn't the problem. It's the first 5 seconds. I will raise specific taxes.
So let's see. People quite like the message. It's a very different worm, I hear, when it's asked to explain how he's going to pay for it all.
Independent Treasury civil servants have costed Labour's policies, and it's £2,000. But you asked for specifics, Julie.
Nonsense.
So let's have a specific difference.
Nonsense.
Please let
I've
Mr Sunak
announced
finish.
the triple lock us,
It's
so that we
nonsense.
raise the personal allowance for pensioners and ensure that the state pension is never subject to tax.
And James, look at that. The numbers are going up. The second he mentions pensioners, protecting pensioners, that Tory 2019 vote. Look at that. That's about as positive as I think I've seen the worm for Sunak yet.
It really is, and you can see, Harry, that the voters are not convinced by some of those Keir Starmer sort of having to explain some of his policies. Pensioners rallies the Tory base. I do have to say, though, if you look at this section here, that is the only point in the debate clips when he's talking about non-doms where the Conservatives and Labour are both in the same place. So it is a very powerful message for
Well,
him.
presumably that's why he stole the non-dom policy at the last
Indeed.
election. They've been seeing these numbers in private focus groups and opinion polls.
Private worms. Private worms.
Private worms. They're private worms. Well, never mind the ballots. It's a public worm. Right. Let's see one more. And this, my favourite one, national service, a talker of the election.
All he can do is sneer at it. Sneer at it because you don't have any ideas for the future. You don't have anything that's bold, that's going to transform our country for the better. And in fact, everywhere I've been, since I've made the announcement, I've had people talking to me about how they think it will be wonderful for their children, how they think it will change our country for the better. And it's an example of the bold action that I'm prepared to take to do things differently to deliver a more secure future.
James, look again. The 2019 Tory vote there, love it. People have been taking a mickey a little bit out of this policy. There's been memes, there's been TikToks, there's been everything. Obviously, I think it looks deeply unpopular with Labour, but is it going to be, is it another one of those wedges that's going to work?
Exactly, Harry. And I think what we need to remember here is that, the Labour 2019 voters, they are not going to come over to Rishi Sunak. They have decided they don't like this policy. They're right at the bottom down there, whereas the Conservative 2019 voters like it. This is one of the biggest gaps we've had between the Conservative and Labour worms. So, for Rishi Sunak, the national service policy seems to work with his base. If I were advising the Conservatives, I'd say, don't worry about these guys down here. It's got these guys into positive territory, and that's what matters.
So, Kate, you followed Jeremy Corbyn around the 2019 election. I was reading some of your old copy the other day. Ignore the 2019 Labour vote, ignore Labour voters, go hardcore on the base.
Yeah,
That's the strategy we're seeing played out. And the numbers are there, aren't they?
Exactly. People need to remember, 2019 Labour voters, these are core Corbyn voters. These are never going to go Tory. They're certainly not going to go Rishi. Tories think this national service policy playing well. They think it's popular with those people that matter. The worm seems to agree. I think you're going to see him double down.
Scarlett, it's going to work?
No, but I don't think not because it is popular. It is popular with the base, but I don't think it's what people fundamentally care about. I think, it's nice that he can throw some eye-catching things out that people say, OK, I like this and I like the sound of this, I like the sound of this guy. But fundamentally, it's not delivering on people's key issues and it's not addressing people's key issues either. I think that's why he keeps falling down.
So, there's two words we haven't mentioned for a while. Nigel Farage. He wasn't at the debate, but he's the man livening up this election. What do the numbers say on Nigel, James?
Well, we asked people, was it right that Nigel Farage wasn't invited to the debate, or was it wrong? And you can see that the public are split down the middle. It's that classic polarisation effect that Nigel Farage does. He does divide people down the middle, exactly divided there. Whatever the public say here, it's clear he's not going away anytime soon, and you can see a good chunk wanted him to be there last night.
Splits opinion in every sense, Kate, Nigel?
Oh, he's lobbed a massive grenade into this election by saying he's going to stand and take the leadership of reform, hasn't he? I mean, watch everything Nigel does. He
Make
produces
plans for
news,
Nigel.
makes plans for Nigel. Nigel will tack this debate to the right as well. Seats or no seats, he will have a big impact on what we're talking about.
Scarlett, if you're a betting woman, which we've discussed many times you are, what odds would you reckon on Claxon going reform?
I think it will go reform. Yeah, and especially seeing the footage out of it yesterday, he was being greeted a bit like a rock star. I mean, you know, it's still a big ask. There's a big Tory majority there, but I think if anyone can do it, he can.
Right, guys, I'm going to let you get some sleep. James, I know you've been up all night with your worm. Scarlett, I know you've been up all night crunching the numbers. Kate, I don't know what you've been up all night doing, but thanks for coming. Thank you, James. Thank you, Scarlett. Thank you, Kate. This was Never Mind the Ballots Election Countdown. 29 days to go. Subscribe to us on youtube.com/election, @sunelection, to watch more. You'll get the videos first there. See you tomorrow.